Ronda Rousey, an unstoppable force. A warrior who redefined women's combat sports. From breaking records in the octagon to becoming a global sensation, her name became synonymous with dominance. But behind the victories, the championships, and the fame lies a story far more complex. Rousey wasn't just fighting opponents inside the cage. She was battling demons of her own. Her rise was meteoric. But so was the weight of expectations. The world saw a fierce competitor, but few knew the pain that fueled her aggression. Personal tragedies, mental struggles, and controversies followed her like shadows, threatening to consume everything she built. This is the story of Ronda Rousey, not just the champion, but the person behind the persona, the pain, the struggle, the triumphs, and the fall. A journey filled with glory and darkness, resilience and regret. How did a young girl with Olympic dreams transform into one of the most feared fighters in history? And what price did she pay for her success? Ronda Rousey was born on February 1st, 1987, in Riverside, California. From the very beginning, life was not easy for her. She entered the world facing adversity, born with a speech disorder due to complications at birth, which made her early childhood a struggle. Words didn't come easily to her, and she spent years in speech therapy, trying to communicate like other children her age. But the real turning point in Ronda's life came when she was just 8 years old. Her father, Ron Rousey, a man she idolized, suffered a tragic accident that left him paralyzed. The one strong pillar of her family could no longer bear the pain, and in a devastating moment, he took his own life. For young Ronda, it was a loss that shattered her world. The pain of losing her father left a wound that never fully healed, fueling an inner fire that would shape the fighter she would become. Her mother, Maria de Mars, was no stranger to hardship. A judo champion and the first American woman to win a World Judo Championship. Maria instilled in Ronda a mindset of resilience and discipline. There was no room for weakness in their household. If Ronda wanted to cry, she had to do it in the shower, away from prying eyes. Every failure was met with a demand to do better. Bullied in school, socially awkward, and struggling to find her place in the world, Ronda found solace in the one thing that made her feel powerful: judo. Under her mother's relentless training, she learned that pain was temporary, but victory lasted forever. Judo became more than a sport. It was her escape, her weapon, her identity. By the time she was a teenager, Ronda had dedicated her life to the sport. She trained harder than anyone else, enduring grueling sessions that left her physically and emotionally drained. But no matter how hard she pushed herself, she always felt like she was fighting against something bigger: her past, her pain, and the doubts that whispered she wasn't enough. As she stepped onto the path of professional competition, Ronda had one goal: to win, not just for herself, but for the father she lost, the struggles she endured, and the silent battles she fought every single day. Ronda Rousey was never meant for an ordinary life. From the moment she stepped onto the mat, she carried the weight of her past on her shoulders. Every throw, every hold, every victory was fueled by something deeper than competition. It was survival. Her relentless training in judo paid off when, at just 16 years old, she qualified for the Athens Olympics in 2004. Though she didn't win a medal, the experience solidified her determination. She returned stronger 4 years later, becoming the first American woman to win an Olympic medal in judo, a bronze at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. But despite this historic achievement, Ronda felt lost. Judo had been her life, but now that chapter was over. For the first time in years, she had no direction. She drifted between jobs, bartending, waiting tables, struggling to make ends meet. The transition from an Olympic athlete to an uncertain future was brutal. The fire that once fueled her seemed to dim, and doubts crept in. Was this all she would ever be? But Ronda was never one to accept defeat. She found a new battleground: mixed martial arts. The world of MMA was ruthless, brutal, and unforgiving, but it was also a place where Ronda could channel all her anger, pain, and frustration. She started training with a single-minded obsession, mastering new skills, pushing her limits beyond what she thought was possible. Judo had given her discipline, but MMA gave her purpose. She studied fighters, honed her striking, and perfected her now legendary armbar, a move so devastating that it would become her signature weapon. Her rise through the ranks was unlike anything the sport had seen. She wasn't just winning, she was demolishing her opponents. One by one, they fell, all within the first round. Her aggression, her confidence, and her unapologetic attitude made her a phenomenon. But beneath the surface, the demons still lurked: the pressure to win, the weight of expectations, and the fear of failure never truly left her. Ronda wasn't just fighting in the cage. She was fighting the voice in her head that told her she wasn't enough. With every victory, her reputation grew. She became the face of women's MMA, the fighter who brought the sport into the mainstream. But with the spotlight came scrutiny. The world saw an unbeatable warrior, but few saw the battles she fought outside the cage. As Ronda climbed to the top, she believed she was invincible, but the higher she rose, the further she had to fall. And when the fall came, it would shake her to her core. Ronda Rousey's ascent in the world of mixed martial arts was nothing short of meteoric. When she transitioned from judo to MMA, few could have predicted just how quickly she would take over the sport. With an unparalleled drive and a skill set that combined Olympic-level judo with raw, explosive power, she became an unstoppable force. Her professional MMA debut in 2011 was a declaration of dominance. Ronda finished her first fight in just 25 seconds with her signature move, the armbar. It wasn't a fluke. Fight after fight, she dismantled opponents in record time, making it clear that she wasn't just another competitor. She was a revolution. The undefeated streak continued as she stormed through the ranks, breaking records and shattering expectations. Her aggression, her confidence, and her ability to finish fights in under a minute made her a star. The UFC, which had never before included a women's division, took notice. Dana White, who once famously said that women would never fight in the UFC, had to eat his words. In 2012, Ronda Rousey became the first woman signed to the promotion, and soon after, she was crowned the inaugural UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. Her fights became must-watch events. Fans tuned in, not to see if she would win, but to see how fast she would dismantle her next opponent. She wasn't just an athlete, she was a spectacle, a force of nature. The mainstream media couldn't get enough. Magazine covers, talk shows, Hollywood roles. Ronda Rousey had become a global superstar, but with fame came pressure. The world saw her as invincible, but inside, she was battling the weight of expectations. The victories only made the stakes higher. The fear of losing, of letting down her fans, of proving her doubters right, it all loomed over her. She defended her title with ruthless efficiency, finishing fight after fight with her devastating armbar or knockout power. No one could stop her until, one day, someone did. The night of November 15th, 2015, was supposed to be another easy victory. Ronda was set to defend her belt against Holly Holm, a former boxing champion. But from the opening moments of the fight, it was clear this was different. Holm wasn't afraid. She was prepared. She had studied Ronda's weaknesses and executed a perfect game plan. Then, it happened. A head kick. Perfectly placed. Ronda collapsed. The crowd gasped. The unbeatable champion had been defeated. For the first time in her MMA career, Ronda Rousey tasted defeat, and she wasn't ready for it. The loss was more than just a fight. It was the unraveling of everything she had built, and the darkest chapter of her life was about to begin. The head kick that ended Ronda Rousey's reign was more than just a defeat. It shattered everything she believed about herself. For years, she had been invincible, an unstoppable force who dominated every opponent. Now, she was the one lying on the canvas, dazed, broken, and humiliated. The fallout was immediate. The media, which once glorified her dominance, turned against her. Analysts dissected her mistakes. Critics called her overrated. And fans who once cheered her name now questioned if she had ever been as great as they believed. Ronda had built her entire identity around being a champion, and now that identity was gone. She disappeared from the public eye. The fighter who once exuded unshakable confidence was now battling depression, self-doubt, and thoughts darker than she had ever faced before. In an emotional interview, she later admitted that after the loss, she considered taking her own life. She had spent her entire life chasing victory, and without it, she felt like she had nothing. But it wasn't just a loss to Holly Holm that haunted her. Beneath the surface, Ronda had always struggled with inner demons: her father's tragic death, the relentless pressure from her mother, and a deep-seated fear of failure. The UFC had built her up as an icon, but she had no roadmap for what to do when the spotlight dimmed. Her return to the cage was supposed to be her redemption, a chance to silence the doubters and reclaim her legacy. But fate had other plans. On December 30th, 2016, Ronda stepped into the octagon once again, this time against Amanda Nunes. The fight lasted only 48 seconds. She was outclassed, outmatched, and brutally defeated. This time, there was no doubt. Her MMA career was over. The losses exposed the cracks in her image. The world saw a different Ronda Rousey, one who struggled to handle defeat, one who avoided the media, one who lashed out at critics instead of embracing the lessons of failure. The same intensity that had made her a champion also made her unable to accept that she was no longer the best. She left the sport without a farewell, without closure. The invincible warrior had been broken, and the world had witnessed it in real time. But Ronda wasn't just fighting battles in the octagon. She was fighting battles within herself, and the journey to rebuild her life would be just as brutal as any fight she had ever faced. Ronda Rousey had hit rock bottom. The losses, the public scrutiny, and the crushing weight of expectations had left her broken. For the first time in her life, she was no longer a champion, no longer the face of women's MMA, no longer invincible, but in defeat. She found something unexpected: clarity. The life she had built around fighting had consumed her, defining her entire existence. Without it, she was forced to confront the question: who was Ronda Rousey outside of the octagon? The first step in her redemption was walking away. She disappeared from the sport, refusing to give interviews, refusing to answer the critics. The once outspoken fighter chose silence. But behind closed doors, she was rebuilding. Ronda turned to her roots, her family, her passions outside of fighting, and the people who truly mattered. She reconnected with longtime love and fellow fighter Travis Brown. In him, she found stability, someone who saw her beyond the championships and the persona. Their relationship became a sanctuary, a place where she could be vulnerable without judgment. Then came an unexpected opportunity: professional wrestling. The WWE had long been interested in bringing Ronda into their world. And for the first time, She was ready. It wasn't MMA, but it was still combat, still entertainment, still a place where she could channel her intensity. Her WWE debut at WrestleMania 34 in 2018 was a turning point. The crowd erupted as she stepped into the ring, proving that even after everything, she was still a superstar. She embraced the role, putting on electrifying performances, and reclaiming a version of herself she thought she had lost. But beyond the bright lights of wrestling, Ronda was also finding peace in other ways. She moved to a quiet ranch, far from the chaos of Hollywood and the fight world. Embracing a simpler life, she explored acting, farming, and advocacy, supporting causes close to her heart. Most importantly, she learned that success wasn't just about winning. It was about resilience, about adapting, about finding purpose beyond competition. The world had seen Ronda Rousey the fighter, the champion, and the fallen icon. Now, they were seeing Ronda Rousey the woman, strong, flawed, but still standing. Her journey wasn't over. It had just taken a different path. Ronda Rousey was never just a fighter. She was a polarizing figure. Someone who commanded attention, whether she was winning or losing. Her dominance inside the cage was matched by her intensity outside of it. And as her fame grew, so did the controversies surrounding her. One of the biggest criticisms Ronda faced was her inability to handle defeat. While she was a gracious winner, she was often seen as a sore loser. After her losses to Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes, she refused to speak to the media, avoided post-fight interviews, and disappeared from the public eye for months. Many saw this as unsportsmanlike behavior, especially in a sport where respect between fighters is valued. Her attitude toward opponents also fueled controversy. She had a reputation for refusing to shake hands after fights. Even when she won, her feud with Miesha Tate became infamous, not just for their battles in the cage, but for Ronda's refusal to acknowledge Tate's sportsmanship. Fans and analysts debated whether this was a mindset of a true competitor or just arrogance. Beyond MMA, Ronda's outspoken nature made her a lightning rod for criticism. She was never afraid to speak her mind, but at times, her comments sparked backlash, from dismissing other female fighters to making controversial statements about mental health. She often found herself in the center of heated debates. Her transition to WWE also had its share of drama. While she was embraced by wrestling fans at first, her later comments about professional wrestling being fake fights angered both fans and fellow wrestlers. The wrestling community, which prides itself on the physical demands of the sport, saw her remarks as disrespectful, leading to a backlash that even affected her on-screen persona. Despite the controversies, Ronda remained unapologetic. She never tried to fit into the mold of a traditional athlete or celebrity. She was blunt, intense, and unwilling to compromise who she was. Some admired this about her, while others saw it as stubbornness. The media built her up as an icon, but they were also quick to tear her down. Her public image shifted from being an unbeatable champion to someone who struggled under pressure. Yet, even with all the criticism, she remained a trailblazer, someone who changed the landscape of women's sports forever. Love her or hate her, Ronda Rousey was never ignored, and that, more than anything, cemented her place in history. The world knew Ronda Rousey as the fierce, unstoppable fighter who dominated the octagon and the wrestling ring. But away from the cameras, the fights, and the controversies, there was another side of her that few people ever saw. Behind the intensity, Ronda was deeply private, often struggling with the pressures of fame. While her public persona exuded confidence and toughness, those closest to her knew the battles she fought in silence. She had always carried the weight of her father's loss, and even at the peak of her success, that pain never truly faded. Her relationship with her mother, Anne-Marie de Mars, was complex. As a former world judo champion, Anne-Marie had been both Ronda's biggest supporter and her harshest critic. Their dynamic was built on discipline and high expectations, which shaped Ronda into a warrior but also left scars. She rarely spoke about the emotional toll it took, but the pressure to succeed had been ingrained in her from childhood. Despite her tough exterior, Ronda found solace in her personal life. Her marriage to fellow fighter Travis Brown became a turning point, offering her stability and support in ways that fighting never could. The couple moved to a ranch, away from the chaos of Hollywood and sports, where Ronda embraced a simpler life, raising animals, farming, and finding peace in nature. Motherhood also changed her in ways she never expected. In 2021, she welcomed her first child, and for the first time, competition took a back seat to something greater. Being a mother gave her a new purpose, one that had nothing to do with titles or championships. Beyond her personal life, Ronda had always been passionate about breaking barriers for women in sports. Even as her own career evolved, she continued to advocate for equal opportunities, using her platform to push for change in MMA, wrestling, and beyond. But perhaps the most surprising revelation about Ronda was how much she valued her privacy. The same woman who once thrived under the spotlight now preferred a life away from it. She rarely engaged with social media, avoided unnecessary interviews, and focused on living life on her own terms. The world saw Ronda Rousey as a fighter, an icon, a champion, but behind the scenes, she was simply someone searching for balance between fame and solitude, strength and vulnerability, the past and the future. She had fought many battles, but the greatest one was always within herself. Ronda Rousey didn't just fight, she changed the game. Before her, women's MMA was an afterthought, dismissed as something that would never succeed in the mainstream. But with every fight, every armbar, and every victory, she forced the world to pay attention. She didn't ask for a place in the sport, she took it. Her dominance in the UFC wasn't just about wins and losses. It was about proving that female fighters could be just as marketable, just as exciting, and just as skilled as their male counterparts. Because of her, Dana White reversed his stance on women fighting in the UFC. Because of her, an entire generation of female athletes believed they could make a living doing what they loved. Beyond the cage, Ronda redefined what it meant to be a female athlete. She wasn't afraid to be aggressive, to be loud, to be unapologetically herself. She inspired young women to embrace their strength, both physical and mental, and to stand their ground in a world that often tried to tell them otherwise. Her influence extended far beyond MMA. She became a crossover star, entering professional wrestling, Hollywood, and even gaming culture. She was a mainstream icon, proving that fighters didn't have to be confined to just one role. But her legacy isn't without its complexities. While she paved the way for women in combat sports, her struggles with defeat and public criticism showed the brutal realities of being at the top. Some remember her as the greatest, while others see her as someone who crumbled under pressure. And yet, love her or hate her, no one can deny the impact she had. She didn't just break barriers, she shattered them. Today, her name stands as a symbol of change. Whether as a fighter, a trailblazer, or a controversial figure, Ronda Rousey left an undeniable mark on the world of sports and beyond. Her story isn't just about victories. It's about transformation, resilience, and the price of greatness. Ronda Rousey's journey is one of triumph, controversy, and transformation. From a struggling child with a speech disorder to an Olympic medalist, from an undefeated UFC champion to a fallen fighter searching for purpose, her story is as complex as it is inspiring. She was never just an athlete. She was a force of nature, a disruptor who refused to be ignored. She shattered records, defied expectations, and opened doors for women in combat sports that were once bolted shut. But her legacy is not without its shadows. Her rise was meteoric, but so was her fall. The same intensity that made her great also became her downfall. She fought with everything she had, not just against opponents, but against the pressure, the expectations, and the weight of her own past. Even in defeat, she never truly disappeared. She reinvented herself, finding new ways to thrive beyond the octagon. WWE, Hollywood, motherhood. Each chapter of her life showed a different side of the fighter, proving that her story was never just about winning or losing. In the end, Ronda Rousey's greatest battle was never against another opponent. It was against herself. And while she may no longer hold championship belts, her impact will be felt for generations. Some will remember her for her dominance. Others will remember her for her struggles. But no one will forget her, because legends, no matter how flawed, never fade away. The story of Ronda Rousey is not just about fighting. It's about breaking limits, facing demons, and redefining what it means to be truly unstoppable.